Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the last session for today's ATD Houston conference. We're so glad to have you here for this last session, which is going to be very, very special. And please stay after this session because we're going to wrap up with some door prizes and also a sneak peek of some coming attractions. So it's my pleasure to introduce the folks from Skillsoft. We're so thrilled to have them close out our session. I want to remind everybody that if you are a member of our ATD Houston chapter, you have access to the amazing application Percipio that was generously donated by Skillsoft. And you can look up books, audiobooks, and a number of resources through Percipio. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, Chris Whalen. And Chris and I have worked together for a number of years. He is a senior customer success manager at Skillsoft, and he really helps people promote and understand the value of e-learning and their investment with Skillsoft. And with my customers and with me in my role with ATD Houston, he's really helped us with analytics and helped us understand what our customers and our users are wanting, what they're looking at, and how to understand those things. So I think that today you're going to learn some new things from both Steve and Monica, and hopefully you'll come away with some great nuggets of information. So thank you, Chris, and I'll let you introduce our other folks as well.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and welcome everybody. First big round of applause for ATD. Today has been an amazing, impactful round of sessions, and I feel so honored to be a part of it. So like I say, welcome to Skilling, the next frontier of learning. We've heard loud and clear how important it is to understand where a learner is in their skill building journey so we can help propel them to the next level. To help us understand how to identify and address skill gaps in our organizations, I have two of our brilliant, innovative, forward-thinking product leaders from Skillsoft joining us today. This will be an interactive session, so we welcome you to go to slido.com, or if you prefer, we'll be putting up a QR code as we have different polls throughout the session. I am thrilled to introduce Steve Yonchak. He is a principal product manager here at Skillsoft. Steve leads the design and implementation of solutions to help companies measure and develop skills in their workforce. He's passionate about creating compelling learner experiences that unlock people's full potential by helping them achieve their professional goals. Steve has created and delivered transformational solutions for corporate learning, strategic rewards and recognition, recruiting, and business operations. He's earned a degree in engineering from the University of New Hampshire and the University of Connecticut. Also joining us is Monica Kraft. She's our senior manager of product at Skillsoft. She leads a team of product owners focused on delivering the most comprehensive and contemporary administrator experience in Percipio, with a focus on lightening the load of today's busy administrators and analytics to help them drive value for their organizations. She's been leading creative product solutions for more than 2 decades. Monica started her career in corporate training at Xerox, and because of her love of software and user experience, she quickly moved into product development, working with top cloud-based providers in both the online retail and learning space. Monica holds a bachelor's degree in fine arts and a master's degree in software development and management from Rochester Institute of Technology. Steve is going to be kicking us off, so I'm happy to pass the baton to Steve. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for such a wonderful introduction. It's really great to be here. I'm just going to do a quick highlight of the things that we're planning to cover for you today. We're going to take you through some of the findings that we've had and some of the things that we've learned from our customers about how to build an effective skills strategy. Part of that, we'll also talk about how companies find success by baselining their current skills and then working to close skill gaps. We'll talk about measurement and how we track the growth of skills within a workforce. We'll talk about strategies to visualize workforce transformation and to take some of those measurements and turn them into meaningful visualizations that help you make good decisions about where to apply your efforts. And then we'll finally wrap up by talking a little bit about the importance of the culture of learning at your company and how Celebrating the success of skill building is a meaningful way of engaging with your employees, both as learners and also as human beings. So one of the question that keeps coming back when we approach the world of skills is companies are asking themselves, is the workforce we have the one we need? And when they talk about that, what companies are saying, what companies are encountering is there are opportunities up ahead, there are risks and liabilities up ahead. How do I, as a learning administrator or as a business owner, how do I transform the organization that I have into the one that we're going to need to face those challenges? And really, there are three different strategies that companies do to mitigate these problems. One of the things they do is they can go out and hire talent. They can go out and pay what the market bears in terms of finding people who have the right capabilities and the ability to meet those challenges. Another thing that people do is they outsource. They go to third parties. They contract for those skills because that's an easier way to get to where they want to go faster. And then the third scenario, and this is becoming more and more important as resources and dynamics like the Great Resignation affect the labor workforce and the labor marketplace, is upskilling and reskilling. How do I take the people that I have today and turn them into people with the right skills that I have for the future capabilities that I need? So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those strategies. But our first poll that we want to talk to you about is when you think of those three scenarios, hiring, outsourcing, or upskilling, how important is the upskilling and reskilling conversation happening when you look at something like workforce development and planning your workforce development? I'm going to click one more slide, and this will open up our Slido poll. If you haven't already logged into the website, you can scan this QR code on your mobile phone and it'll bring you to a mobile browser that will let you answer this poll. So I'm going to pause here for just a second to give people a chance to respond to the poll. Okay, so that's a very interesting finding. I was going to say 93%-ish of the people who are responding are saying that that this is important or very important. So I think that what we see there reflects what's happening out in the marketplace. Many of the companies, most of the companies that we talk to are finding their way to a point of view where I can't just hire my way out of the skill gaps that I have in my organization. I need to go out and find ways to proactively engage people and to bring them into an environment where they can continually upskill and reskill their skills and their talents within the organization. So through the course of talking to many customers who are in the process of upskilling, there's some common themes and some common steps that people are taking that help them create a landscape for this upskilling and reskilling. And Monica, I know we've talked a little bit about taxonomy. Why don't you kick us off and just talk a little bit about what the role of taxonomy is in this framework?
Yeah, hi everyone. Based on that poll, Steve, I think it's pretty clear that people are really interested in this topic, and that our strategic framework that we've developed here at Skillsoft is probably going to be a big help for everyone. These 6 pillars that we're going to talk about, obviously, certainly Skillsoft can help with those, but that's not why we're here. We're here to talk to you about the importance of each of these pillars in your overall strategic upskilling framework. And the first one is really taxonomy. And taxonomy is important. We're going to dive a little deeper in a second, but it's important mostly to answer which skills are the top priority skills for your organization. You need a way to have a common language about that conversation in your organization. And a skills taxonomy is a great way to do that.
And I'll jump on next. The assessment capability. What organizations are doing is they're trying to validate whether their training programs are effective. They're trying to quantify the number of people and the depth of capability of their organizations, and they want to do it with objective measurements. What are people learning? And not just what are people learning and how much time are they spending learning on it, but what's the way that they demonstrate that capability. So we'll be talking in some detail today about assessments and the new diagnostic assessment that Skillsoft has recently rolled out. And Monica, jump in now and talk a little bit about learning and the learning step of this process.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, without learning, we don't have skilling, right? So learning is arguably the most important step here. But really what we're trying to do with learning is answer the question of how do we actually move our learning population from point A to point B, learning, one or more new skills continuously. And so this is an area that I think probably everyone on this call is a really strong focus area for you, is learning. But we're going to talk about how to, make that personal and effective today.
Yeah, and part of making it personal is recognizing that this is happening to a human being who's a whole person and a learner. And people have complicated lives. They have a lot of things that are demanding their attention. Being able to inspire somebody and provide them motivations and providing them with cues and reminders to go back and re-engage with learning is an important part of keeping people on track towards acquiring the skills that they want. And then what you also want to do is you want to be able to assure that the investment that you're making in this learning experience is sticking, and learning reinforcement is a really important component of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the different strategies that help effectively reinforce the learning that people are coming up with. And then, Monica, I know this is your passion. To talk a little bit more about measurement and how measurement factors into this.
Yeah, we're going to talk about measurement today because there's a lot of different things that we do want to measure along this upskilling journey. Some of it is really like, what are your people interested in? What are they spending time on? And ultimately, what is their skill gain overall? And Steve, as I was looking through this, I was like, oh, we need an acronym for this. TALERM.
TALERM, yeah. I don't know.
Good.
We need to talk to the marketing folks for that one. I think. I don't know if I'm gonna run out with TALERM. So Monica, why don't you lead us through a little bit more detail about skill taxonomy and what that means in the context of upskilling and reskilling?
All right, so I'll pose a question to all of you. What skills does your organization need, right? What skills would you prioritize strategically for your organization? How do you answer these questions? And as I mentioned, it really helps to have a skills taxonomy. A taxonomy is really a term that refers to the classification of skills in a hierarchy. Some of you might use the word ontology. Similarly, this is a classification system, but it usually goes one step further and describes the relationship between skills and how they can be applied and so forth. So whether you have a taxonomy or ontology doesn't really matter, but it's important to have one of these things. And what it will really help you do is help your employees understand which skills they have, how those skills might relate to your overall organizational needs or how it might relate to their jobs. And then finally, it would even help learners figure out what they should learn next. And so a taxonomy is a really useful tool. It's really not to capture like every skill in the entire world, right? It's really about capturing the most essential skills that are relevant for your business strategy overall. So.
And I'll just piggyback on that, Monica. A lot of companies are defining skills and roles together, where they define a role and then a role is a collection of skills arrayed at different levels of capability. Talk a little bit, Monica, about the data that we've collected about this.
Yeah, well, it's really like, if you want to stay on top of this, right, you have to be able to predict the future. And thank goodness we have organizations like the World Economic Forum that can help us do that. And in their recent jobs report, what they the information they brought to us, of course, is that there is a huge shift that's happening between the division of labor that, is between what humans can do and what machines can do. And this is causing, disruption and changes in the skills that we need and the jobs that we need. But what is clear is that half of the employees need reskilling, and this is by 2025. That's only a few years from now. As you can imagine, we have a lot of work to do. And nearly 100% of business leaders really have an expectation that employees learn on the job. That's part of the deal, right? They come to work and they don't know everything they need to know to do their job. If you want to move on to the next one, Steve. One of the things that we have been, researching along with organizations like the World Economic Forum and Burning Glass and others is really, what are the top jobs? Because if we can look ahead to the future, then we can prepare. And interestingly, you can see that these jobs here, a lot of them have the word data in them. Most of these are very technologically focused, right? Data analyst and scientist, AI and machine learning specialist, big data specialist, business development, information security, of course, is always huge. Software is huge, and Internet of Things. But if you kind of balance that, right, against the skills that are needed, it's ironic when to look that 8 out of 10 of the top skills for 25 are human skills, right? Soft skills, what we sometimes refer to as power skills. And these are skills that move people, right? Soft skills allow humans basically to pivot and transfer their expertise to, not just their current role, but their next role and the role after that. So developing these skills is, a pretty good investment for most employers. So once again, just so ironic that the top 10 jobs are technology focused and the top skills are human focused. Oh, time for another poll. Just want to make sure everybody's awake after such a long day of learning. Chris, let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. What we want you to do here, this is hopefully a word cloud. I think that's what we chose for this one, is go ahead and just type in, the name of a skill that you think is in high demand at your organization. And it'll be interesting to see how you name your skills as well as we go through this exercise. IT. Do you think communication is an important one? Oh my gosh, thank you for saying empathy. I strongly believe in empathy. As a product manager, empathizing, with our customers and admins and the end user is really a critical part of our job. So. Critical thinking never goes away, does it, Steve?
No, it always shows up there. Communication is always an important thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the smaller ones. Flexibility, resilience, these are new skills, right? That we're learning. We're trying to teach our children as well.
Ambiguity is a really interesting one. I totally get why that's there, and it's part of adaptiveness and resiliency that I think many organizations are struggling with, is how to guide people through difficult changes.
Yeah, well, this is great. I feel like we've got a lot of feedback, but in, reflection of what we were just seeing from the World Economic Forum, it looks like 8 out of 10 of these, or 80% of these that are here, are soft skills. I mean, I'm seeing financial technology. I'm seeing technical skills as kind of a general bucket. IT, technology. But I'm not seeing, like software development, programming, Python, some of the ones that we would hang our hats on, right, Steve?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, well, let's go on to the next slide. And what we really wanted to focus on here, kind of before moving on to the next pillar, is just, again, trying to help you think about how you can develop a roadmap of your own and how you can forecast the skill gaps in your organization. We relied heavily on research, right? Because there are organizations like we talked about the World Economic Forum, but Burning Glass is one that we look to a lot. We have a partnership with them. They're an analytics software company, and they provide like real-time data on job growth and skills in demand labor market trends in general. And so what they've done is they actually have a technology that basically looks at all of the job postings around, the internet, so to speak, and tries to diagnose what the top job roles of the future are and where the, impending skill gaps are. And Skillsoft has really used this information to almost develop our product roadmap for a feature set that we have, which are called Aspired Journeys. Aspired Journeys, if you wanted to kind of genericize the concept, is really a targeted learning path that is focusing around a particular job role, or even broader yet, maybe a career path from data analyst to data scientist, which it might be a long career journey for someone to take. But either which way, the importance of really using data, getting it from your organization or getting it from outside of your organization to help inform your roadmap, kind of laying out your prediction, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, what skills are we going to be needing to be developing in-house? And then trying to find learning paths or develop learning paths that will meet the needs of those people trying to build those skill sets is really like a big job. And it's learning and development's job for the most part, right? This is not something that HR at large will take on. And it's probably not something that individual managers will take on. They can provide the scaffolding and the support, but the actual, learning pathway is something that L&D has got to kind of take advantage of available sources out there, or, devise your own. And so, Steve, did you have anything to mention more about, hints and tips on how to develop these learning paths and resources that these guys might be able to use?
Sure. I will say that there are more than one. The World Economic Forum has done a great job of synthesizing data from a number of different sources. When you compare what they say to what other sources are saying, there's a lot of commonality. I think people know that the digital landscape is driving a lot of things. I think one of the reasons you don't see technology skills float as high up in things like our word cloud is that the technologies that people use are so disseminated that picking at something like Python or Java, it doesn't work for every company. So I think that's why the critical thinking and some of those things come up so high. And looking at future demand is that activity that your organizational design team is looking at to say, here's the things, here's where the opportunities are going to lead our company, here's the obstacles that we're going to encounter. That's going to provide the template for how to convert the roles that that your organization has by adding skills and reinforcing certain skills within them. The journeys, we are happy to help customers do this. A lot of customers develop their own as a function of feedback they get from their business partners who tell them what kinds of things I need for a product manager to be able to do. And sometimes that varies from company to company. So, what our Percipio users are able to do is use our stock journeys or create their own. So, sometimes being able to build off a template is a great way to get started, and then gradually tailor that to the needs of your organization.
Yeah.
I would just point out, as we go through this, you'll see some squares here. People who download our presentation afterwards will find these are links that lead to back to some of the thought leadership and white papers that we have on Skillsoft.com if people are interested in learning more about these items.
All right.
So let's talk a little bit about assessments. This was the second box in our 6-box flow. One thing that we find is helpful when talking to learning and development leaders, and one ring out from that is that there's different forms of assessment, and they all accomplish different things. Basically, there's 2 groups of assessments that we kind of bracket the world into: formative assessments and summative. Formative are ways to predict how successful somebody's going to be, or what kind of learning is going to be required to make them successful. Summative is more confirmatory. It's how do I know that the learning that we've applied to somebody is appropriate and has led to somebody who actually understands the landscape of applying this skill to the context of my company. The reason this is useful to raise is that there's lots of assessment modalities out there. There's lots of different tools and different providers of this. It's important to ask the critical question: what is this meaning? What does this particular assessment mean to my learning path for my learners? Because that will help you understand which parts of this landscape of assessment are most useful, and how to apply them to the learning paths you want to create for your organization. And the takeaway from all this assessment is generally, how do you define what's proficient? How do you know when people know enough or know the right stuff to effectively apply a skill in their role? So one of the next poll that we ask, we want to understand a little bit about, within your organization, what are the ways that you define proficiency? What are the ways that you look at somebody's role or the skills they have in that role and say, yes, this person's got it. They've got what my company needs.
It's funny.
Yeah.
This is the evidence of competence that that Duncan was talking about a little bit earlier this morning, right? How do we know when people have kind of mastered a skill?
Yeah. Combo, yeah, I agree. It's not just one thing, of course.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm.
It's an interesting spread, and one of the things that's interesting here is how much of these definitions of proficiency, or the things that you rely on to confirm your proficiency, are based on pathways that can be fairly subjective. A manager appraisal and peer reviews are more than half of what you're recognizing, and yet those things can be fairly subjective. It's an interesting dilemma that a lot of companies find themselves in, is that getting the knowledge right is one part of the problem, and then getting the context right is the other part of the problem. In fact, that's probably even in some cases more important, and that's why I think manager and peer review comes up so high as a function of assessing somebody's proficiency. Is that these are the people who know about what somebody can do in the context of their workplace.
Yeah, at least in the chat, I saw at least one person is doing self-assessment, even though it looks like it's a pretty low percentage overall. But I'm always, never surprised that the manager appraisal wins, because it's a human and it's available, right? It's available to you, where you might not have a diagnostic, or you might not have a system for managing peer reviews, or you might not have invested in certification across the board for your entire organization. So yeah, the managers are always there. They never go away.
Well, and the manager appraisals, where the customer feedback that Adam mentioned in the chat comes into play too, I think.
Yeah, the customer feedback. I think that's a great one. Customers are usually pretty objective in a way.
So thank you everyone for providing the feedback that you did. We want to talk a little bit about a new offering that we've just introduced to the Percipio platform called a diagnostic assessment. We call this a skill benchmark in our world. And the mode of diagnostic assessment is fairly well understood. You provide a set of questions. The questions are tied to specific learning objectives. And the assessment then provides the learner with a clear idea of which areas do you need to focus on for development, and that helps you converge more quickly on your workplace aspirations. In the new product that we've developed, we've created this new asset type called the benchmark assessment, and the skill assessment is a short, low stakes formative assessment that's designed to have the learner demonstrate what levels of knowledge they already have with a particular skill. It's a shorter form of 20 to 30 questions. It usually covers about the learning concepts that are in 10 to 20 hours of learning. And what it does is it provides, our tool provides some feedback for the learner. Here's what your skill level is. This is a motivation piece. We see this as a solution, and companies who are using this kind of strategy are finding success in measure, leave space for learning, and then remeasure using the same assessment. So we're providing that kind of solution within the Percipio framework. And then we also feedback recommendations. So this particular form of assessment comes back with learning recommendations that will help somebody remediate the score. We'll talk more about why these different modalities are all offered here, but learners can grab a short video, something that just fills in the gap in time that they've got, helps them answer a question that they didn't get correctly on the assessment. We also recommend longer forms that, based on the questions that are answered incorrectly, we serve up courses that can be longer. They're usually half hour to an hour and a half in duration. And these are ways for somebody to take not just the one question that they got wrong, but the package of learning content, the learning objectives that were around that one question, and give them the ability to develop knowledge in that area. And then whenever possible, we try to pair up the ability to learn with the ability to practice. So we offer practice modalities. We also offer ways to go out to predefined career paths in our Aspire Journey library that helps people get quickly to the learning pathways. So what this does is it leads somebody to a place where they can quickly remediate the gaps that the diagnostic detects, and then bring them into the other forms of assessment through the normal learning paths, where they do knowledge checks, and they do practice labs, and they do course tests to confirm their knowledge. So Monica, I know we're going to talk next about learning paths. Tell us a little bit about the importance of being inclusive and personalizing learning experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we're like preaching over to the choir here a little bit, Steve, about inclusion and personalization and learning. But when I look at, what we can offer for effective skilling, it always boils down to kind of 5 things that we can do. One is just make space for learning in general. This is, an obvious one, but, when we poll our employees, the first thing that we hear back from them is they don't have time to learn. So we have to make space for learning. It has to be, a company initiative. It has to be, a part of your culture overall. Secondly, really provide content choices. This way, learners can match the content to what they want to do. And we talked about short form, long form. We talked about, video versus audio. We talked about, hands-on versus other types of immersive experiences and so forth. But make sure to have some choice available to learners. And don't forget about, the hands-on practice piece of this. We'll talk more about that in a second, but we want to practice safely, right? We don't want to break anything. And so it's important to consider how we can make opportunities for practice that are safe. And then don't forget about the last one, which is coaching and mentoring. These things go hand in hand. And we have managers, but we have peers, we have other people in the organization, and we may even have external coaches. So provide that extra scaffolding and support for your learners with, a little bit of all of these things in your learning strategy. So if you go to the next, the slide, sandboxes are a safe way to practice if you're able to, but don't forget about, traditional instructor-based training, or ILT as we like to call it, right? We kind of, the pendulum swings a little bit each way as we go through developing our learning strategies each year. And sometimes we put more emphasis on this, and sometimes we put less emphasis on this. But it's always tried and true. It's effective, right? So we want to use it, but maybe not all the time. And then, of course, challenges is a really fun way to make life fun. So the last thing, I'll mention again is just about the practice. Practice makes perfect. And if we don't provide ways to practice, then it doesn't happen. One of our favorite formats at Skillsoft are these labs. And we've introduced a new kind of a lab, which is called a challenge lab. And some of the things about it just make it, it's obviously it's hands-on, it's secure, it's incremental, it's interactive, it has elements of reward, and it works great. So, if you don't have labs, just Google it and find a good lab provider out there, because it's really become a super effective way to help develop mostly technical skills, but I would say mostly technical skills. We have other ways of developing soft skills that involve practice, and sometimes that's scenario-based learning. Sometimes it's role-based or role play and things like that you can do internally within your organization. But don't forget about practice.
So let's talk a little bit about helping the whole human learn, and what that means for us. What you may have seen on the previous slide, where we talked about data from World Economic Forum, 94% of employers expect on-the-job training. So that has an implication that your learners are trying to do this while they have a full-time job. It's not like they're going to go leave for a week and go learn some cool stuff and then come back. So it's really important is to find and put into practice some of the best practices that are about that help people find meaning, that gives them a reason to come back and create time in their busy schedules, because they have to defend that time from all the other things that are asking for time from them. So those things are setting learning goals, giving learning meaning through celebrating learning successes, being social, and then learning in the flow of work, learning how to take the flow, learning how to take small bits of learning and fit it into your normal work stream. So the way we look at goals, that there's really two pathways for it. One is to set a defined objective to learn something like 30 minutes a week. This has the benefit of creating a virtual cycle, a virtual a closed loop of rewards, that every time you achieve that goal, you've continued to advance not just the learning and the things that you've learned, but the habit of learning and coming back again and again. The second kind of thing we see customers doing is setting a goal to achieve a certification. So, and I say certification, a defined package of learning that leads to a specific capability. So regardless of how long it takes, you spend this many months and achieve this certification, and then there's a celebration that goes along with that. We launched a time-based solution within the Percipio platform last year. Some of the research that we did leading up to that was that learners who had set learning goals ahead of time were significantly more likely to achieve those goals and had higher levels of engagement within their learning experience. Making it meaningful is about celebrating the achievements somebody has in the learning context. So Again, two ways that we see people doing this. One is by achieving levels of engagement. We see this in some forms of gamification where somebody gets an acknowledgement when they complete their 10th hour of learning, or when they log in for 3 days in a row or something like that. We are looking and actively looking at gamification strategies, and we already have in place digital awards and badges that that provide certificates in completion of learning milestones. So this is, I completed a course, I completed a journey. I now have a digital asset that I can carry with me throughout my career that demonstrates that I have applied myself to acquiring this knowledge. So that's another form of celebration that people can celebrate inside the company, or take and broadcast through through LinkedIn or other kinds of social media platforms. And then one of the things that you might have noticed when Monica was talking about the different learning modalities and how to structure a learning program is that for many people, learning is a personal experience. It's about creating a shared space where people learn. And this is itself its own form of inspiration, that if you feel like people are relying on you or expecting you to participate in the learning experience, it becomes a richer experience because you put more into it. We find that this is happening directly through instructor-led learning, but we also find that it's happening through companies who are using some of their enterprise social media, things like their team applications or Slack. We recently rolled out a Teams application, a plugin for Percipio. We're in early days of that, but we do have some customers who are really using it pretty assertively. Chris, talk a little bit. I know you and I shared with us some success stories of people who are applying this and putting it into practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of organizations are using instructor-led training functionality within their LMS to really drive the adoption or participation in organizational book clubs, right? Why not have an instructor-led training session with multiple different time options available for people to participate in a shared learning experience by sharing their thoughts on a book? And by using your instructor-led training function to roll that out, it helps you to measure your success over time, right? You can measure how many people were participating in your book clubs throughout the year and how that's grown, maybe even share some information toward the end of the year about what the most popular book was. And as far as, using Microsoft Teams or Slack, right? That's a fantastic way for you to socialize any learning experience. You can create a mentoring circle without really having the time demands all the time, right? People can share what they're learning. They can share the organizational context within a conversation by keeping the conversation open and flowing.
Thank you, Chris. We also are recognizing, going back to the degree to which learners are doing this in their active workday, that involves taking learning and breaking it down into smaller chunks of time that they can slot around meetings, slot around breaks, slot around otherwise downtime that they can get to. And digital learning is a great way to get to this. So one of the things that we find customers are having success with is using digital learning to fit these small learning units and in collections of learning objectives into small, as available, time permitting segments of a learner's day. One of the other things that I think a lot of people forget is that going into a digital learning session doesn't necessarily translate to the acquisition of knowledge that stays with you. There was some very interesting work done almost a century ago by Herman Ebbinghaus. He was a psychologist that just demonstrated that people forget things over time, which is kind of intuitive, but also demonstrated that practices like distributed practice, taking a skill and applying it in lots of different locations, taking testing that reinforces practice and putting those learning concepts up in front of the learner helps them retain things. And then one of the underappreciated ones, and it comes back to things like mentoring and having more peer mentorship and direct mentorship, is teaching a friend. That the act of teaching somebody or mentoring somebody actually reinforces that learning for the mentor, the person who's offering the guidance to the other learner. So we like to have this in mind, and we actually just this past quarter rolled out a practice testing flashcard application that rolls through our mobile application, where somebody can go in and review learning content that they had previously consumed, that comes at frequent intervals as the several days over the course of several days following the learning event. So Monica, talk a little bit about what you see as the owner of our reporting and analytics capability.
Yeah, I know we're running close to being out of time, but so I'm going to move quickly through these. I wanted to mostly give you ideas on what you can measure. And the three major areas that we like to measure is, first of all, to find out what your learners are interested in developing, what types of skills are on their mind, and hopefully they align with what's on yours, because if they don't, then you have an alignment issue, right? And you need to solve for that. But the second piece of that is really about the time, effort, and energy that your people are putting into developing their own skills. They need to be recognized for that work. And then finally, we ultimately are looking to measure skill proficiency and hopefully the ability to kind of match up people to where we need them in the organization. So let's kind of do a quick speed dating round here. And this shows you what we call skills discovery. It's like, what are people opting into? At least in our platform, you know, learners have the ability to kind of check a box and say, these are the areas that I want to learn when they onboard into the platform. They can change that anytime. So that alone is really helpful. The next one is really, what are they searching for, right? We know that search is probably the most common way that learners are trying to find content. What are the search terms that they're typing into that search box? That can result in like a whole bunch of information. Also help you guide you. The next one is, you know, what skills am I actually building? So this is activity measurement. Most of your LMS platforms or other types of learning systems are going to let you measure activity by, we'll call it, you know, subject area, or by skill, or, you know, by container, like a folder. And so if you can really keep track of that, then you'll know where the effort is that's coming in. And yes, that ties back to your taxonomy. I saw your comment there, Lisa. That is absolutely exactly right. That's another good reason that we have a taxonomy in the first place. This one I love, and this is, you know, this is harder to do, but what this does is it gives you a snapshot of your skill level distribution. So if you have a skill taxonomy and you have a way to baseline your people where they are against that skills taxonomy, then you can measure change. And so this is a really important one, is really knowing how many people do you have that are, you know, novice or just getting started? How many people do you have that are developing? And how many people that you have are proficient? And what this is showing you is, how do you look at that organizationally over time, right? And there's the reason this is hard to visualize is there's two strong dimensions. One is the number of people that are participating. So on any given day, you may have, you know, a different number of people that are participating in Python skill development. And the way we like to measure this is picking sort of an interval, like a quarter, that you can see the change from quarter to quarter on those two dimensions. How many people are participating? And then what is the delta between where they start and where they finish? And by doing this, looking at it organizationally, you can actually put in some metrics. The one that I'm showing here is called the growth rate. So it's saying between the beginning of the year and the end of the year, what is the delta? And by knowing the delta, I can measure that against the past value to show a growth rate. And I can do that for each of my levels. So I can look at novice, developing, and proficient to see what is the growth rate for each level, and then average that to get sort of an overall growth rate for Python as a skill. So I wanted to show you this. I have an Excel file that you know, you can punch numbers into for this one and just try it out. So I can make that available to the people on the call if they're interested. And so as we look through, you know, the the choices that we have and the measurements that are readily available, go back to the slide that shows the 3 things that you're trying to measure and come up with strategies to do so. And that's all I had for that, Steve.
Sure. Great job. Chris, I know that you help a lot of customers with this idea of creating learning cultures. To bring us home and talk a little bit about creating a culture of learning.
Thanks, Steve. So learning cultures are too big and too important to be the responsibility of one individual or one team, right? Learning and culture belong to and are created by each of us working and growing together. Everyone has a part to play. Demonstrating commitment to learning at the top level in an organization could be something as simple as sharing high-level learning metrics at an annual town hall event, right? Highlighting total course completions, time devoted to learning, the costs associated with that time devoted to learning, maybe even include a couple of internal promotion numbers for that same year. At the manager level, a unified approach to the application of a tool like our skills assessments targeting an important skill gap within the organization can help to create shared experience amongst the team. They now have a shared goal with room for a little friendly competition. And providing employees with formal mentors or coaches can help learners identify their blind spots and help them to identify the best next step in their skill building experience. And if in order to socialize it, right, team leaders might even want to consider having sessions where everyone on the team can get together, share their developmental goals, progress, lessons learned, and apply important context to that skill being developed within their organization. I guess I'll close out with this one last statement from Adam Grant. In performance cultures, people are determined to prove themselves, but in learning cultures, people are more interested in Oh my goodness. In performance cultures, people are determined to prove themselves, but in learning cultures, people are interested in improving themselves and the organization around them.